Hello and welcome to Cheshire Audio. Now, if you hear any strange noises in the background, we're right in the middle of Storm Dudley, this new thing of naming storms. And there's a lot of rattling and howling around the back of the shop where the wind's whistling around and catching the shutters and making a racket. So if you hear anything strange going on, it's Storm Dudley. What I was going to talk about today is that there is a bit of a crisis in this speaker industry at the moment. Costs are getting a little bit prohibitive, really, particularly on cabinets. There are real problems keeping the price of cabinets sensible and keeping the quality up as well. This has been going on for a few years. Slowly, things have been increasing in price and increasing in price. Some of the bigger names have sort of given into it, having things made in China. I mean, before that, there's a couple of manufacturers in the UK. There's a couple in Europe that are used by all the big names. It's getting a bit wild out there. And like I say, some of these companies now have shipped they're actually particularly just cabinet design, not the entire design of the speaker, but they'll design the speaker and then get the cabinets made for that speaker and have them shipped back. Not very eco-friendly, not an ideal thing to do. And companies they want to keep things in-house, but if it's cheaper to have things done abroad, then they'll have it done abroad. Recently, the shipping costs have gone berserk, so this is like a worldwide issue, and it's becoming crazy expensive to have things shipped back from China even. So companies are going to have to start thinking differently about this. I mean, you can't really sensibly, at a sensible price, have sort of nice wood veneered cabinets, this sort of thing anymore. It's actually becoming really difficult to produce, quite expensive to produce. That sort of thing. So somebody somewhere is going to have to start thinking outside the box. And obviously, who's that going to be? It's our old friends at Rega. And today we're going to be talking about the Rega Kyte. It's been out for a while, but I've finally got a demonstration set to sell. Let's have a look. Here we go, a pair of Rega Kytes. And the reason this is sort of out of the box thinking, I mean, forgive the pun, will be revealed as I open them. I'm just going to set up the camera and let's have a look what's inside. It's actually got my Stanley knife ready. I always say never use a Stanley knife to open speakers. I mean, people will be getting bored of it now. What I tend to do is stick my finger really close to the end there and just use that tiny millimetre bit that's shown at the end. It's actually got a picture of my Stanley knife on there saying don't use it. So don't do this. It's only because I'm opening boxes on a sort of daily basis that I've sort of got the technique to it, but you can completely destroy the innards of a container like this if you don't do it right. So let's have a look inside anyway. The reason I've not had any of these up to now is that there has been quite a waiting list. So I've sort of held back quite a bit from having demonstration set. Right, where are we? So inside you can actually see the top of the speakers already. A bit of a packing piece there. I might have to position the camera again while I get these out. Quite like their overcomplicated packing rig. It's quite intelligently designed, but hugely complicated. There's one. Two. And a couple of little brackets, which I've actually managed to come out of the little wrapper, but I'll have a look at this. What's that? Now that Rega have actually finished all the RX models, so all the RX 3s, 5s, 1s have all gone, because they just couldn't, they were going to have to put them up by so much, it just wasn't viable anymore. So the only speaker they're actually manufacturing at the moment is the new Kyte, which is a fairly new model, and it's used as part of System 1 that they well, announced 2 years ago, and eventually it came out sort of a couple of months back. So here we are. So you'll be saying now, okay, so they're not using wooden cabinets anymore, they're using plastic. Not totally plastic. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to reposition and have a closer look at what's going on. So, Rega Kyte. Is it plastic or is it something else? Well, what it is phenolic resin, and Rega have used phenolic resin for a long time now. It's kind of, forgive my lack of knowledge on this, but I think it's kind of related to Bakelite. And they use it on the P1 platter, well, for the P1 platter. They use it for the sub platters on the Plano 1, the Plano 2 and Plano 3. I mean, the Plano 2 and 3 have been using the same material now since the early 70s, very effectively, to be honest. The thing about phenolic resin, it's very easy to mould, it's very rigid, it's light, and acoustically it's got some great properties. It's extremely dead. It doesn't really sort of transfer energy very much. It seems to absorb resonance. So it is very dead in that respect. So it's a brilliant material for sort of an acoustic sort of applications, which is why it was always very good to use as a subplatter on a record player. I mean, Rega have been criticised for using a plastic, in inverted commas, subplatter, but actually, yeah, it's actually a really good material to use. Now, when it comes to speakers, I mean, the same properties apply. You want a very dead cabinet. You want a rigid cabinet. Ideally, if you can have a cabinet that doesn't have any parallel sides. Now, with MDF, that's really difficult to create, because the cost, as soon as you sort of go from the 90-degree angle, it starts to become very expensive to have these things made, and to finish them off and to make them, to get a sort of professional looking product. It's actually quite an expensive thing to do. So if you're looking at moulding it, then that's completely different. You can do what you want. So I think from a materials point of view, it's a stroke of genius. I think possibly from a marketing point of view, and Rega don't generally sort of think in marketing terms, it's not as possibly domestically acceptable to have something that looks like a plastic box in your front living room. I actually think, to be honest, I think they look very smart. I think they look very clean and pure and everything else, but I'm not totally sure whether that'll be everybody's opinion on them. Cost-wise, the phenolic resin cabinets, I think, are something like a third of the cost of an equivalent straight-sided MDF cabinet. Probably you can almost sort of halve again the cost against something with the, because if you look at it, it's none of the corners are straight. The only flat face is the front. All the sides and the bottom and the top curve inwards to the back. Everything is unparalleled, if you want, which with the speaker is kind of what you're trying to achieve, because you don't want equal reflections within cabinets. Like in a room, you don't want equal reflections. It's much better for sort of, you want a sort of much deader situation within the speaker, and you don't want reflections back from the driver hitting the back wall and coming straight back. You don't want things rattling around inside and confusing the signal from the driver. So anything like that, where you can sort of alter the angle slightly or whatever, all adds to the quality of the sound, and it's very effective. Very effective. I mean, on top of that, there's quite a lot of internal bracing on these as well. They have a ceramic brace, which I'll put a picture, if I just move, I'll put a picture up here in front of the dragon tree, of the actual diagram of the internal brace, and it's quite an extensive brace internally as well, so it's very rigid. And obviously, because the cost of the cabinet being so much less, it means they've then got a sort of cost gap, so to speak, to be able to use really good bracing. And the drivers are of very good quality as well. I mean, you probably recognise the base unit is very similar. It's a sort of an adaptation of a driver they've been using for years. I mean, if you look at a picture of the original Kyte, because this isn't the first time that Rega have used the Kyte name, early 80s, could be even earlier. I'll look it up, and I'll put a little comment down the bottom here. The original Kyte was probably 82, 83. I might be wrong on that. Very similar concept to this, really, but with a probably a chip, in those days probably a chipboard cabinet. But the driver is very similar looking driver, which was an adaptation of the sort of, well, it wasn't an adaptation, it was a collaboration with Joe Ackroyd. If I'm being completely honest, I was never that keen on the original Kyte. I always thought that the Royd version, because there was a Rega version and a Royd version, I always preferred the Royd sort of examples of that sort of collaboration. But to be fair, I think the original Kytes, if you drove them well and you had an ideal situation, they were superb, but they were actually quite difficult to get into a really good situation, to be honest. I think the Royds tended to be a bit more system friendly. So yeah, I've got the very obvious sort of Rega drive of the base unit, their own drive, which is unusual nowadays. Most people seem to buy in drivers. Rega's own treble unit, really good treble. I mean, Rega treble units are really good, and again, an in-house design. They don't buy in from a Scanspeak or any of the other companies that sort of everybody else seems to use. So yeah, good on them, really. I mean, it's price-wise, it competes against things that are substantially more expensive. Obviously, for that extra cost, you get more prettiness, possibly more sort of, say, domestic acceptability. But depends what you want out of them, really. To be fair, I think it's quite a brave thing for them to do. But I can sort of see where they're coming from. If you want to make a budget speaker now, which it kind of is in the budget market, you're going to have to make compromises. And the one thing that Rega wouldn't do is compromise the sound quality. They're not going to put a really nice cabinet on it and then put a cheaper driver in, which is kind of the direction that some manufacturers seem to be going. They seem to be looking at the internals and looking at the drivers and going down market, just so that they can keep that sort of, that magazine look, the sort of show home look on the magazines with the nice wood veneers and all this sort of thing. But anyway, I'm going to stop and just turn the speaker around. Let's have a look at the back panel, because that sort of shows the curves quite a lot better, and we'll just have a look at the connections on the back. Yeah, back panel. So you can sort of see the curves very clearly on this. It's quite rounded off at the back. The actual how small the rear panel is compared to the front panel, because everything's really kicking in quite sharply, really. Vertical connectors on the back, positive, negative. They've got 4mm at the ends, and then you've got binding post as well. And you could use bare wire on that if you would, but generally better with a binding post, or better with a spade connector or a 4mm. Rear ported, fairly common nowadays, really. I mean, it's probably going to need a foot, 18 inches behind them. Generally, depends how well driven they are. If they've got an amplifier that really does keep a grip, then you probably get away with less than that. But that's something you need to experiment with them, and just move them in and out and just see how they react to it. I've put on there's a little foot that comes with them, which you might have noticed that was sort of loose in the box for some reason when they arrived, but that just screws onto the back, and it means that when they're on the stand, you can either have them sat down a little bit and sort of firing upwards a little bit, or if the stand, this isn't big enough, to be honest. The top of the stand isn't big enough, but you can actually sit them up to the level. So if they're on like a sideboard or a shelf or whatever, you could actually have them sitting more level if they're higher up. So there's a few options there. I'd assume there'll be some sort of wall bracket that'll fit that as well. Not a fan of wall brackets for speakers, but in some situations it's all you can do, really. So yeah, that's the Rega Kyte. Let me just turn them back round again. Okay, so that's the Rega Kyte. Actually look quite good on the Atacama Mazecco stand. Seems to suit them quite well. And they do that sort of. I've got them sort of with a slight uplift at the front, which suits them quite well. Seem to work quite well on there. Actually, I've managed to have quite a listen to this pair before. Not running yet, but I've had a bit of a listen to between takes. Obviously, I've heard them before, but I've just not actually heard them in this room properly. Very clear, very punchy. Yeah, surprisingly punchy actually. I think that's down to the rigidity of the cabinet, to be honest, and the quality of the drivers. So yeah, really good. Yeah, one of those that do take you by surprise a little bit for what a small box can do sometimes. So yeah, I'll just swing the camera around. Hope you like that one. Yeah, review of the Kytes. I think the Kytes obviously are going to be the first of a new generation, and I have been talking to Rega about this, and there's some crazy things coming, really crazy things. Obviously phenolic resin is a wonderful substance, but when you couldn't really transfer that that into a big floor standing speaker. I mean, again, the domestic considerations, when you get into the bigger speakers, it's not going to work, I don't think, really. I mean, acoustically it would, but I don't think visually it would. And there's other things that come into it, really. But Rega have got this sorted. They've got a direction with this, and they know where they're going. You won't believe what they're going to make the speakers out of. And this is the talk at the moment. I can't say anything, but there are mad things afoot. They've got a speaker designer from a very surprising other company has joined them. All sorts of mad stuff. So that's to come. We'll talk about that in a future video. But anyway, thanks for that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a like. I will see you in a future video. Thank you very much.